Hey guys, what's up? Squatch Talk coming at you live tonight. This is episode 11, and I'm just going to throw this straight to Ern. I'm Pat, and I'm going to throw it to my cohort, Ernie. Ernie, go.
Well, thank you. We are the Primate Objective. I'm Ernie. This is episode 11. We wanted to talk tonight about an event that we attended on Saturday at the Expedition Bigfoot Sasquatch Museum in Cherry Log, Georgia. Dave Bacara and his wife Belinda, the owners of this museum, put together this past Saturday a Bigfoot eyewitness town hall meeting. Most of these Bigfoot eyewitnesses are from the southeastern Appalachian region. Excuse me. A couple from the North Georgia area, and a couple from a couple of incidents from were talked about from North Carolina and generally the surrounding area. It was very, very interesting. There were a few Bigfoot investigators there on kind of a panel, listening and commenting on each eyewitness's account. Matt Pruitt from the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. He's been an investigator with the BFRO for many years as for the state of Georgia, and more recent years specifically, he's been an investigator in the North Georgia region. So it was nice to have that kind of expertise, for lack of a better word, and insight into the phenomenon. People like that who could comment and ask questions of these eyewitnesses about their accounts. And I think you and I had it was a pretty interesting experience, wouldn't you say, Bud?
It absolutely was. It was a little mind-blowing, to be honest with you. It exceeded my expectations and kind of provoked some things inside of me that I was not prepared for. I gotta say,
like the emotional response.
Yeah, sure. I mean that was a big deal to me, and I do want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny. I mean, I know it meant something to you too, because I called you yesterday, and we talked about doing the show, and you're like, dude, I'm still processing. I'm not ready to do the show. So obviously, man, it meant something to you as well. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I suppose I was less surprised by that. I was, it was a very, very insightful and interesting event to attend. I have to say that I suppose for me, it was kind of what I expected. Not that I expected anything good or bad. No, I mean, it was kind of what I had expected to see and hear. However, seeing grown men tear up in front of a room full of people as they're telling about a Bigfoot encounter is not the kind of thing a lot of folks would think might lead a man to tears, might bring a person to be emotional.
Yeah.
Now I've heard and read, countless reports, countless encounters from people who describe having that kind of emotional reaction of fright, fear, tears, shaking, everything during their encounter. And then after, in the retelling of people's encounters, I'm familiar with hearing folks at least appear to get a little choked up, or they appear, again, I'm just being neutral here and being fair as someone who looks into this phenomenon. It appears that people do still retain a very emotional, visceral reaction even when recounting their experience. And so to see that from people who, this was not apparently the first time that these folks had ever told their encounter, and it still got them a bit worked up. And they're not professional speakers. These are not polished people who go around speaking at the Bigfoot conference circuit rather. These are folks like you and I. These are everyday folks with lives who went out of their way to make sure that they could get to this event. And again, every person that got up there, you could classify to speak as an eyewitness. You could classify as a reluctant witness. They were not, they were not jumping up at a podium with fanfare, anxious to tell their story. You could tell it took a little bit of request, a little bit of prodding to get them to do this. So yes, it was very powerful to see these folks standing there, sort of stripped down, sort of bearing their soul in front of a room full of strangers and talking about their encounter and how that encounter has affected them. I can only imagine, again, if it sounds a little odd, if it sounds a little disconnected to people, well, that's understandable. I've never had a Bigfoot sighting. If I had actually ever in my life seen a Class A sighting of a 9-foot tall giant hairy monster looking at me, I would imagine that would have an effect on me emotionally, mentally, even years later, as I'm continuing to live my life in society, it's still going to be there. It's going to be, under all these other thoughts that I have in my life, it's going to be something that has a profound effect on me. So I try to imagine having that mindset and then standing up in front of a room full of people and telling them about it. And as I tell them, this, stripped down bare soul of mine is having to admit, yes, it disturbs me. Yes, it bothered me. Yes, it scared the hell out of me. I can only imagine how how those emotions would come up in me also in the same position. So yes, it's, you try to put yourself in these folks' position, and I don't imagine that you would come across any differently,
Yeah. Well, it was very real to me, and in a way that I never experienced before. Oddly enough, you and I have been talking about Bigfoot to each other for 12, 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never had anything to do with the community or people who eyewitnesses, or up until recently.
Well, a couple of isolated eyewitnesses, but
yeah,
other than that, around in more of a communal, a group of people with sort of shared interests and shared experiences. Yeah, that was very eye-opening. Not to mention, just like I had said to you, walking through the parking lot, you're seeing all these tags, literally from many from states very far away. People traveled to be a part of this, and every car in the parking lot had at least one Bigfoot sticker of some kind on it. And you realize, wow, these people like this really are out there. People who have had sightings are really out there, and by God, they've all shown up here tonight. It was, it was a powerful thing to feel and to witness.
It really was. It was profound.
Yeah.
And so for me, listening to Chronicles or whatever, and you'll pick that up in a lot of that. A lot of those episodes, or that context is seems to always be there, where they'll admit on air, man, it makes me, I'm shaking talking about it. I'm trembling. I'm getting upset. I've heard a few people start to cry, on those shows. And that's one thing to hear it, but when you see it happening right in front of you, it just becomes 10 times more real to me.
Yeah.
And I was really blown away by that. And that was definitely a theme of the night, is these people that were telling their stories, just like you said, grown men. They weren't breaking down and just, getting hysterical or anything, but they would tear up and they would tremble and they would admit that they were having physical effects just talking about that encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it just blew me away. I was very moved, really, truly moved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a moving experience, just the overall big picture of it. Yeah, here we are, two guys who've been interested in this topic for many years. as we said, driving back through the mountains that night to each other, you know, imagine 12 years ago when we first started discussing this, and what a fringe topic, of course it is by definition, still a fringe topic. But compared to what it was back then, we could never back then have imagined that there would be a Bigfoot museum, not a shack, not a room at the end of a convenience store, an actual full-on Bigfoot museum in North Georgia, you know, with people walking in all the time telling their encounters, and there we were sitting at a Bigfoot eyewitness town hall. You know, it says a lot. It says a lot. This wasn't just in some church basement somewhere. This was in a Bigfoot museum that is just doing gangbuster business. And, you know, something's going on here, folks. You know, something's going on, and it's not just beef jerky commercials tainting people's minds. You know, there's a real phenomenon happening here that's getting people to drive from many states away to expose others to what they say they know. And it's powerful.
Yeah. And
powerful to see all of it.
Yeah, it was. And so, yeah, that was definitely probably the one thing that hit me the hardest was what we just discussed, man. Just how moving it was to see these people visibly get, you know, physically affected by what they were talking about. It brought a realism, a dimensional realism that I haven't experienced with the phenomenon yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was powerful because you're seeing these folks, again, like we said, grown men. You know, if they were standing there recounting for a group of people, group of strangers, an auto accident that they were in, you know, they wouldn't be breaking down into tears like this. You know, it was obvious this was something that, you know, made a huge impression on these people. In addition to the witnesses that were up there, one of the guys was a former police officer whose experience happened when he was a police officer. You know, these are credible people who otherwise would not have any wild or fantastic story to tell, but they've had this experience, and it's pretty amazing. And of course, we got to hear lots of comments about other stories from the panel of Bigfoot investigators that were at the front of the room. We got to hear a lot of good insight about the North Georgia area from Matt Pruitt. I'm sorry. Yes, from Matt Pruitt. And of course, Dave Bacara, the owner of the museum, he obviously has heard lots and lots of stories. And that's a fantastic part of all this, is that because, of course, he has a Bigfoot museum, and it's on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. So people can, you know, they can pull into this parking lot and walk in and tell an encounter to Dave and his wife without having to let the whole town see where they're going. You know, this Bigfoot museum is not in a strip mall. It's not next to a big shopping center or grocery store. So, you know, Dave Bacara and his wife, they get to hear stories from people all the time who tell them that they've never told the story before.
Yeah, and that's real. Yeah.
Yeah, just an incredibly rich, Dave and the museum there is just an incredibly rich resource, and I guess kind of a focal point of where, you know, lots of folks feel comfortable to go in and tell someone who's like-minded, tell them about their story. So it's a very, very interesting little phenomenon in and of itself that's happening there.
Yes, and in full disclosure, you know, because Dave's been on the show, and then of course in the last show we were kind of, you know, talking about this event. We are not sponsored. There's no sponsorship that the Expedition Bigfoot gives us. We fully talk about this through our own you know, opinions and beliefs. So.
Yes. Yeah, we just, you know, we can't say enough good things about that museum, only because it's, you know, it's legit. It's not just some roadside attraction with a bunch of Bigfoot things in it that might appeal to children. This is a very, very well-informed, comprehensively put together exhibit that you could spend a whole day there if you wanted to watch, read, and listen to everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can't stress enough how important it would be for any Bigfooter to have a visit to that museum. I've heard someone else say they've been to a few other places, other Bigfoot museums. You know, there's a couple out in Washington State, Pacific Northwest area. And this person said, no, this is the best one, easy. The biggest and best one in the country by far.
I think it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. I've done a lot of studying on the other ones, and they don't appear to have anywhere near this kind of setup.
Right, which is fine because they're obviously they don't compete, you know.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
and we're not trying.
Unless you live in the middle of the country and you're trying to decide if you want to drive, 1,500 miles this way or 1,500 miles that way.
Yeah, exactly. Drive this way if that's your choice. Make sure to drive this way.
Yeah, that's what we have to say. Yeah.
And it's in Cherry Log, Georgia. If we did not mention that right off the bat, this museum is in Cherry Log, Georgia, North Georgia.
Yeah.
But back to the event itself, it was very interesting. It was nice to be able to speak with some folks afterward and make some connections that would be good for, your and my interest in this. And perhaps, we hope that we'll be able to speak with some eyewitnesses from this area, which is of deep interest to me. Hopefully
me too.
Those are inroads that we'll be able to go down pretty soon. So it was just a fantastic event, and I would imagine that this will be the first of many to come.
Yes. God, I hope he does them every 6 to 8 weeks. I think he could pull that off, to be honest with you.
He could. Yeah. But I know, as serious as he is, I'm sure he would want to make sure that he had the meat and potatoes first, which are the believable, compelling eyewitnesses, to base gathering around. And apparently there's plenty of them around. Something that you and I have come to learn about this area and the Southern Appalachians, at least specifically. There appears to be a very long history of Bigfoot encounters going back in this area as long as anywhere else in the country or the world. Well, in this country, yet it is not talked about. It has to do apparently with just cultural differences, maybe how people live in the Appalachians and how they homesteaded, being in these, smaller foothill type situations and far removed from each other in very, very remote, homesteading places. And these mostly Irish, Scots-Irish, Protestant folks who have been in these mountains for generations and generations, many since roughly the Revolutionary War era. So
they don't talk about it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, that particular culture, how that culture developed, again, I can't put a fine point on why, but despite this long, storied history of Sasquatch in the Southern Appalachians, people do not talk about it. And it's only through talking to investigators who say that they've had folks from these areas speak to them confidentially that you hear about this phenomenon here. Otherwise, you would never hear about it. And it's stunning to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having grown up here, having grown up in this area and never having heard a word about it until now.
Right. Well, they don't talk about it, and I think they just learn to live with it. And you know what I mean? Like they just learn. Yeah, they just learn to live with the boogers in the woods or whatever, and live and let live kind of policy or something. And they're the last people that are going to go down into the metropolitan areas and start talking to people about this stuff. I mean, they think we're all, I say we, but they think those people are all crazy anyway, right?
Yeah. And it's understandable, particularly how older generations would have remained more tight-lipped. I would like to think that, you know, this current generation today that comes from these southern Appalachian areas are going to have a little more exposure to, you know, mainstream media and the internet and all that kind of stuff.
True.
It'd be nice, yeah, that we might be hearing a little more from the people themselves, or, you know, going more public occasionally here and there with their stories. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting phenomenon. Who's to say why exactly? But you know, we can only sort of guess, like you were just saying, that, you know, particularly the older generations, they were simply not going to bother being the person, you know, who went to town and stood on a stump and told people about hairy people in the woods.
No, forget about it.
Yeah.
No, but they'll warn their kids and grandkids. That's something that we've heard a lot of.
Yeah.
You know, they will warn their family, their youngins in the family.
That's right.
You know, don't go here after dark, or don't go here on this particular day. You know, just like one of the guys told us, it's like his grandmother or great grandmother saying, "Don't go past the barn today." It's like, you know, stuff like that. You know, but yeah, dude. I kind of want to pivot to another thing that blew me away, and this is a very personal thing. Was one of the guys, and I'm not gonna say people like or locations. I'm not comfortable with that because I don't have permission to do that, so I'm just not going to. But one of the other researchers there, who was talking about a troop of Sasquatch in the area that I grew up in. And that really blew me away, because we're talking a pretty major metropolitan area. You know, not the size of Atlanta, but, you know, a good size. And he started talking about it and them being there. And so when I went to, you know, talk to him after it was all done, I mean, this guy wasn't full of crap, and he explained it to me. He kind of laid out the locations, and it sort of made sense on paper to me, but I just can't believe there would be Sasquatch that close to modern neighborhoods. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around, and it's really it's not bothering me, but it's something I can't stop thinking about, you know?
Right. Well, you know, when I hear things like that are close to large areas, large developed areas, I may just write it off altogether, or if I have an interest, if it sounds like a compelling, detailed report, then I will immediately look at the map and look at Google Earth so that I can check out the topography, check out the forested areas, the water sources around there. And typically, you know, as long as you've got a corridor, a pathway of wilderness that comes from a wild area into a developed area, well, there's no reason to think that a Sasquatch couldn't occasionally, whether intentionally or by accident, find themselves a little closer to urban development. Now, I have just a little saying here that, you know, if these creatures exist, then most of the stories we hear are true. That means most people do see them crossing highways. People do see them in their neighborhoods, even though their neighborhood butts up next to a national forest. But when you see deer in your yard, that does not mean that the deer live in your shrubbery. If you see a bear coming down, getting into the north of Atlanta, it's because it's a drought time and he's following the river down, which is heavily wooded on either side, all the way from the North Georgia mountains down into Atlanta.
Yeah.
So when people see Sasquatches that might be, I swear to you, I saw a Sasquatch at the dumpster behind this Walmart. You're thinking, oh, come on, please, really, behind a Walmart? And then you look at Google Earth, you realize, well, that Walmart was just built. It is the first bit of land in that part of the county that was cleared for any kind of human development. I bet it displaced deer and bear and birds and frogs and possibly Sasquatches. So if you see a Sasquatch near an area like that, that's perfectly reasonable. But it doesn't necessarily mean we have to immediately assume that Sasquatches live right behind the Walmart, you see, or live in this person's neighborhood, or live next to that right outside that big city. I don't know. But just because people have had sightings doesn't necessarily mean you've got a breeding stay put population, particularly with a species that most folks argue is on the move, is a nomadic sort of creature. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in there. It doesn't mean that people don't see them near developed areas, but it also doesn't mean we have to assume that they're living right there. If you're a
true,
yeah.
But here's my thing. In this one particular area, you know, for there to be Sasquatches even anywhere around there, much less hanging out near neighborhoods, then I mean they're limited to where they can go, in my opinion, anyway, because I mean they're not going to get to New York really without passing through all kinds of. I mean, well, I don't know, 150 million people. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like, so they can't, you know, it's not like they're going to Washington State and back, you know, so their areas are limited. And to me, it almost seems like they always are going to be around people. And that blows my mind. Like that these animals basically they're getting trapped, and with modern society is trapping them in. There's no way they can make it to Washington State unseen. There's no way they can make it to New York from Georgia unseen that I can think of.
And you're referring to this particular area because of where they allegedly are. They would be surrounded by so much development that they wouldn't be able to get out and be seen. Well, there'd
be no way for them to connect to that, like the Appalachians from there. Sort of like, think Florida, you know, like if there are Sasquatches in Florida, they're completely cut off. Like, forget about it, you know. Like they're not going from Florida to the North Georgia mountains, you know. Again,
I don't know that that's entirely out of the question. There's still so much forest, you know, there's still so much forested land in Florida and, you know, southern Georgia. To me, that's within the realms of reasonability, inland, making it from one state to another. But, and again, I'm outsider 2 cents here. Of course, if these creatures exist, then people are going to see them occasionally, and you don't have to be in the middle of nowhere to see one. But that doesn't mean that they live right on the outskirts of town. You know what I mean? That's just my take.
But it seems that they will come there.
Sure. Of course. It seems that way.
It's so in my mind, Ernie, what I'm saying is that they don't live very far away to have to come there. It's not a 500-mile journey.
Well, it doesn't have to be 500 miles, but it could be 5 miles where I live. You know, 5 miles in a particular direction could literally put you in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
and so that's the way I see it. I see it, you know, Sasquatches live in the middle of nowhere and they venture out. And occasionally they come close to civilization. They get seen occasionally. They're drawn in perhaps by curiosity, by food, by dumpsters, all those sorts of things. I would imagine that, you know, the minute they come over a ridge and see down below them a little valley with a town in it all lit up, they're going to turn around and go the other way for the most part. That's my take on it. And when they get on that ridge top and are looking down, they're probably in someone's backyard. Someone sees them, but again, they turn around and go back to the middle of nowhere. That's just my take on it. That's the only way I see a flesh and blood species staying hidden, is that when they do get close to human development, it's pretty rare. That's just my opinion.
Well, this guy claims that there's, you know, a troop or a family living in this area that's where they spend the summer. So
right,
that's living. and that they leave that area because the canopy drops, and they would be exposed in that particular environment. I'll just say that they're in then and there, which makes sense because, you know, the canopy does drop here like no other place in the world, I don't think. And I mean, we literally go from Vietnam to, you know, like, I don't even know what to compare it to, like burnt out forest. It's almost, you know what I mean? Like, which that's weird too, because that would still be in the southeast. Like, where do they go? This canopy's still gone, but I guess it's not a place you want to be close to, like super close to human beings with the canopy down. So you probably want to go way more remote, and there are some national forests around there. So
yeah, I'm sure it's entirely possible that over time, a place that Sasquatches visit or occupy most of the time could, again, like you say, kind of get cut off by human development springing up here and there. I would just imagine that under the cover of night, such creatures would know to get the heck out of Dodge at some point, or otherwise we would see them. And I would also suggest that Sasquatch is living in an area that winds up being where human development springs up around it would be a relatively rare and anomalous thing to begin with, because of a specific topography. But who knows? This guy may have, he may have lightning in a bottle. He may have the work cut out for him if he's able to, really locate where these things are.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go check it out.
Oh, I hope you do.
I am. I mean, he basically, threw the invitation out there. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll come check it out. I want to see. I want to see and hear what's going on in that area, because that's where I grew up. I mean, it's
exactly.
like, and I grew up in a city. I didn't grow up in a rural environment. I grew up in a city, and it's just really hard for me to wrap my head around this.
Yeah, well, I look forward to checking out those photographs you sent me earlier, and just kind of just researching that area a little bit more, because it's very intriguing. Very intriguing. And again, just as we talk right now, I'm still thinking back to the Eyewitness Town Hall. That's something that again, made a big impression on us, and I certainly hope that it will, some of the contacts we made will open up some doors to be able to speak with eyewitnesses from this area. Because again, just like you're, surprised at, wow, you mean somebody's telling me they're doing Bigfoot research in my, near my hometown where I grew up. And, I've practically lived in this area my whole life, and so I've certainly spent a whole lot of time up around here. Never heard one story, until after I got into the Bigfoot topic and realized the area where I live is rife with reports, but the locals do not talk about it. There's not a hint. There's not a cartoon Bigfoot in a window anywhere. There's nothing, but naturally my interest is, I don't know really how to word it, but it would be very exciting to me to finally be able to sit and speak to someone eye to eye who is from this area, who claims to have had a sighting. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Right. Which is funny, dude, because Matt Pruitt grew up like literally right down the road from you.
Yeah. That's funny. I was probably only in my second or third year, 2005 or 06, thereabouts, when I had made contact with Matt just to discuss basics. And that was that. I never spoke to him again until, of course, this past Saturday. And I was very familiar with his name at the end of all, as the investigator for Georgia Reports. But yeah, it was very nice to know that he was still involved in this, and a shock, like you say, to realize, holy cow, he's talking about essentially the roads that I live on.
Yeah.
As to all these different areas he was familiar with and where he grew up. So, Yeah, man. I'm hoping that there is a wealth of information here that I might be turned on to.
Yeah, yeah, and there is. I could tell. I could tell that. Which Matt, dude, Matt's somebody who'd be great to get on the show. Like we're definitely gonna like try and woo him onto the show. No pun intended.
Yeah, we might leave out the woo part. That might help.
Right.
But yeah, we hope so. And we're also making a few contacts with some scientists. So we hope that we'll be able to have some very informative guests on upcoming shows.
Yeah, man.
What do you think there, Bud? How are we looking on time? I know I've got a cabin that needs my attention, and unfortunately, my remote broadcasting location, which is not my remote living location, has left me without power at the moment. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. What else did you get out of the conference, and like, what are some things coming up, man?
Well, that's a good question. I guess that's a real good question. Other than my looking into speaking with some scientists that are in relatable disciplines, relatable fields like primatology, anthropology, etc. And again, hoping to make contact with some of the folks we met up there at the Bigfoot Eyewitness Town Hall. That's about it. My studies, my research, my interest in this continues, despite being at times when I'm not quite sure where the information could lead.
Yeah.
It's still it's a fascinating phenomenon to me, and this many people, to see folks coming forward and talking about it who obviously could find better things to do with their time. You know what I mean? They're not paid celebrities who show up, again on some speaker circuit. So it makes an indelible impression, and it makes you want to know more. It makes you want to study and find out more.
Agreed. And I think, what this conference did for me, man, was it put me at the 100% level of this is a phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
Say what you will, I don't know what they are. I don't know why the phenomenon happens. I don't know if it's internal, external, both. I don't know, but it is definitely a legit phenomenon, and to me, the biggest one in the world. Like,
you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. I don't know what causes I don't have the absolute answer for what explains this phenomenon. But as you say, I've been for several years now. I've been at that 100% mark where I know there's a phenomenon. Grown, reasonable people are seeing and experiencing something, and we don't really have an absolute answer for it yet. So it's very powerful, and like you say, it may be the most powerful sort of biggest mystery in the world, because we've been to the moon, yet if Sasquatches exist, they were under our noses, and we went to the moon and did not know they were here. So if we do discover them, then to me, it's way bigger than landing on the moon. In many ways, it's bigger than if an alien spaceship lands on the White House lawn tomorrow. That's almost to be expected, probably by 90% of the public these days, because the universe is huge. Telescopes can't even see it all. So yeah, if a spaceship shows up, that's all within the realm of what we accept to be possible.
Sure.
Possible. Most of us just do not think that this Bigfoot thing could be possible. So if such a species is discovered to exist here in North America, yeah, I think it's absolutely it's just gonna blow minds all across the continent, all across the world. Of course, it may not compete with the absolute jaw-dropping, stunned mindset of seeing a spaceship land on the White House lawn, but you get my point of comparison here.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
again, I mean, I'm not sure what these things are. I still live in the world of they're likely just an undiscovered hominid, because that's the best I have to go on at this point. But I know this for sure: it's a phenomenon, and all you have to do is listen to a few people, just a few, tell their stories, and then know on top of that that tens of thousands of these stories are out there, probably hundreds of thousands that we'll never hear.
right.
I think it takes a special kind of person to be affected to the point where they realize that they need to talk about it, and that will make them feel better, you know.
Yeah, and these eyewitnesses, they don't also claim to have seen Elvis. They don't claim to have seen, witches riding on brooms, and they don't claim to have aliens visiting them every Tuesday.
No,
These are,
it's very consistent.
as I said, these are otherwise very reasonable, credible people who all have jobs and families like anybody else, and they have this one thing that is so earth-shattering for them, and they talk about it. So they're not people who go around telling fanciful stories.
That's correct. And their stories are consistent in certain degrees of the story.
In most, yeah.
So it's like you said, it's not a random spooky story where they're saying, they saw purple wings or the flying witch or whatever, and then one guy said, well, I saw a hairy guy, like a hairy giant thing. It's like they're all saying they saw the same thing pretty much. A big hairy dude, kind of ugly looking human, but not right.
What people describe sound like members of the same species. It sounds like they are reasonably describing in detail creatures that all belong to the same species, whether they're of different ages, different sexes, different hair color, but creatures of the same species. The behavior, the correlations, the similarities between what these people describe in regards to behavior, from throwing rocks to the vocalizations, the similarities in the tracks, on and on and on. It's all these things that corroborate each other, that you cannot ignore.
Nope. And a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much, like, objective open-mindedness to get into the world where you start being really compelled by it.
Yeah.
So I'll say this, Ernie. Unless these guys are a secret society of BSers and hoaxers, and I mean that true, like a secret society, right?
Yeah.
Where they have a special club, and it goes throughout the generations, and their thing is that they are really good at telling spooky Sasquatch stories.
Yeah. And they're really good at building and engineering stilted, bendable, flexible legs with flexible feet and splaying toes that can somehow sink into a weight of 600 pounds, and trackways of 100 tracks that go for miles and have 5 to 6 foot stride in between them. It would take a lot. You're right. It would be one hell of a secret society.
But that's what it would have to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm dead serious. That's what it would have to be. And to be honest with you, that would blow my mind more.
Of course.
Than a living creature we haven't discovered. So I don't think that's what's going on. I just wanted to throw that out there. That's how powerful it is, that you actually start thinking, well, could this phenomenon just be a secret society of hoaxers? And I'm talking tens of thousands of hoaxers You know, it.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, that's unrealistic. Somebody would have spilled the beans by now, right?
That's right.
So
that's right.
So yeah,
once you study the phenomenon in depth and you realize the scope of it, then you realize that it cannot be explained by hoaxing. It cannot be explained by just storytelling to perpetuate some spooky legend. Any reasonable person that looked at the entire scope, the whole history of this phenomenon, would be left having to admit that yes, either there are real creatures or something else that is not, but it's not going to be hoaxing.
Or
hoaxing does not explain it.
Or misidentification. Because
right.
how dude, okay, if you misidentify a bear in the woods, and well, then what you're doing is you're kind of saying, well, I saw a dark, sort of hairy, furry figure moving through the woods. Like, that's not going to traumatize you, you know, just because you couldn't, you know, you couldn't clearly make out that it was a bear because you never saw the snout, but you're like, you know, that doesn't traumatize you. If you're thinking in your head, well, it could have been a bear, well, then you're just going to spend your life going about your life and never even thinking of the incident ever again. These people are like, I remember it, I smell it, I peed in my pants. You know, that's not misidentifying a species. Absolutely not.
Correct. That's correct. You cannot hoax 9 feet tall, 5 feet wide, as big as a cow on 2 legs, bounding up a hillside in front of an oncoming car. You can't hoax that. So no, hoaxing does not explain it, and a bear does not explain it. No known wildlife will explain this phenomenon. Animal misidentification is not an explanation for this phenomenon, period.
That's correct. Otherwise, it would just be, did I just see a bear? And then move on, you know?
Yes, exactly. No one who may have seen a bear is going to run into town or tell anybody that they saw anything other than what might have been a bear.
Exactly.
A bear is a dangerous and rare enough of a species to sight out in the wild. It's plenty to be entertained by or interested in or shocked by. You don't have to add anything else to it. Bigfoot eyewitnesses do not, the creatures they describe seeing are not bears, period.
Exactly. And the weird twist in that, Ernie, is that some of those Bigfooters who see these things and see them clearly, not Bigfooters, I'm sorry, eyewitnesses, they will try and rationalize right there in the moment that they are looking at a bear.
Correct. Yep.
When they know they're not.
Yes, the naysayers, yeah.
They'll just,
yeah, the no-footers will say, oh, well, yeah, it's just animal misidentification and hoaxing and blah, blah, blah. And they're obviously just not looking into it, you know?
No. Yeah, I mean, eyewitnesses they'll see a big, hairy, you know, giant 8-foot thing walking through the woods, and they'll sit there and try and fit that into their reality as they know it, and think, well, is that a bear? Is that 2 bears like fighting or something? You know, like they'll just, you hear it all the time. They'll just rationalize it, and try and make it fit into what they know, and eventually they have to come to grips with it and go, I saw what I saw. It was a giant hairy dude walking through the woods. His shoulders were 4 feet wide. It's crazy. And I'm sorry, that's just what I saw.
And like I say, many of these naysayer scientists, they want to say that because Bigfoot is popular in our culture, then people's thoughts are primed. People know about Bigfoot. Therefore, they kind of want to see a Bigfoot. They get in the woods and they see an animal like an elk or a bear, and they immediately say, oh, I've seen a Bigfoot. Well, they're idiots. Those people who say that are idiots. Period. Yeah. And if you're listening, you're an idiot, because what Pat just said is the case almost to a person. that claims to see a Sasquatch, the first thing they think they're seeing is a bear. It's not a Sasquatch. The first thing that's in their mind that they go to try to label what they're seeing is a bear, not a Sasquatch. Period. Right. So, you know, these naysayers are because they're commenting definitively on something they've never even looked into.
Yeah, and then they'll start jumping into other species and then other just strange scenarios they're trying to come up with, like it's a you know, dead moose on a tree or something, you know, like just weird stuff, right? Because they're trying to rationalize it, and like I said again, man, eventually they come to grips with what they saw. Yeah. And they accept it as for what it was. It's like, no, this is what I saw. You know, I saw a big, giant, hairy ape-man thing walking through the woods on 2 feet. Period. And now they can share that. There's more places to share that, and that's good for them. You know.
Yeah.
That's why we're seeing this explosion, man. People are coming out every day, feeling comfortable, because, and that's the other thing I want to say real quick before we go. Is that was a I hate to use this terminology, but that was a safe space for people who have seen them. Anyone could have walked in that room that night and said, "Hey guys, I've got to tell you something. It's been killing me for 20 years." And they could talk almost like a AA meeting or something, you know.
It's a bit of sanctuary for them. They know that they're in a place where it's going to be all right to talk about it.
Yeah. Nobody's going to give you crap. Nobody's going to, you know, laugh at you or say you're funny. And we kind of heard some weird things that night. Let's be honest. You know, there was a couple of like off the beaten path things that did get heard. Nobody made fun of anybody, you know, or ridiculed them or tried to tell them they're crazy. And so that's a really wonderful thing for these people. And I think that's another part that really like touched me and moved me, because that element, you know, as an outsider, which I am, I'm pretty much an outsider, to be able to see that, I was very compelled by it, man. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, we'll wrap it up for this one, dude. I'm so glad we got to do that. We'll do it again. The next one, you know, we'll be there. We'll have an even bigger presence, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, thank you to the Bacaras for putting that together, and hopefully we'll be able to attend some others in the future.
Oh yeah, man. Next one we are there, and I hope he does it again soon. Like, yeah, you know, a couple of months or something like that.
Well, folks can check out their Facebook page, and please check out our Facebook page. We'll make sure to post any sort of events that we become aware of, or any good stories or research efforts on our Primate Objective Facebook page. So,
yeah, and yeah, I'm going to be going to my hometown, hopefully next week, to investigate where these squatches are, and I'll report back on that, buddy.
I'm looking forward to it.
Hopefully,
looking forward,
and unless I get killed.
Well, we'll just have to hope that doesn't happen.
Well, that's all right. I'm going to implant a couple of GPS devices, so last laugh will be on me. You're welcome.
Yeah, we may find a Sasquatch, but it'll be from tracking down your femur.
That's right.
Exactly. But at least you will have led us
welcome.
The ultimate prize. We'll say thank you.
I'll definitely, I'll be in the documentary, so that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. We know that Bigfoot will be on your tombstone in some word or phrasing. So thank you. Thank you in advance for making that sacrifice for us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just make sure you take down the one that got me. All right, buddy.
I will. I'll do everything I can. I promise.
But it's okay. I'll be fine, Ernie. I'll have my torch. So
good.
Little inside joke there. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap it up, and we just wanted to kind of do a free-for-all show, man, and just kind of get that excitement and thoughts out of us, man. It was very, very cool and compelling, and for me, it was mind-blowing. I'll be honest. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, man. Pretty interesting. Well, until next time, it was a good subject, man. Glad we got to talk about it.
Yeah, and everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you guys next time. All right. Good night.
Good night.